Welcome back, everybody. I'm Margot Smith, Director of kluge-ruhe. And once again, I want to invite you to join me in acknowledging and paying respects to the Monacan people who are the traditional custodians of the land that we're on today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speakers. And I want all of us to appreciate what a rare treat it is to have an artist of such international renown here with us at UVA. Balang John Mawurndjul, OAM, was one of the artists whose work was included in the 1988 Dreamings exhibition. And he's been represented in nearly every major exhibition that we've talked about over the last 2 days. Magicians de la Terre, Aratjara, the Aboriginal Memorial, and numerous other exhibitions over the past 30 years. Last year, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney showed a major retrospective exhibition of his work, John Mawurndjul, I Am the Old and the New, that traveled to the Art Gallery of South Australia as well. kluge-ruhe was honored to contribute one of the paintings from our collection to that exhibition. Also associated with that exhibition are a website that we're going to be consulting for a couple of videos, and it's voluminous and it's full of great information and videos and all kinds of resources to learn about Mawurndjul's country and about his work. And a beautiful catalog, and you can see the catalog when you come to kluge-ruhe and use our study center. Today, Balang is going to talk about his art practice with Murray Gard. Murray is a linguist and an anthropologist whose research has largely focused on the ethnography of communication in Western and North Central Arnhem Land. He's particularly focused on establishing long-term community-based projects that promote and maintain the use of endangered or minority languages in Arnhem Land and in Vanuatu. Murray's worked with Balang since 1988, and he spent more than 2 years working with him on I Am the Old and the New. Please welcome them both to the stage.
Yo konan gunen gudang udbere kon bayang udbere gamagong in ngamam ngabar nang gonda America.
I have come here to America, and at this point I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of this place and pay respects to those people. So I'll just explain how this is going to work, and I think it's already been explained by John Mundine last night when he spoke about the 5 artists each having their own languages and their respective trailing anthropologists and linguists who were able to have conversations. It took some time because you have to go back and forwards between English and the Australian languages, and that's what we're going to do today. We'll have a bilingual conversation, and it's perhaps quite germane that we should be doing this in the UNESCO International Year of Indigenous Languages. It's great to hear an Australian language being spoken here in the United States for this particular event again. We're going to look as an introduction to a couple of little videos from the major exhibition of Balang's, which took place in the second half of last year at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, and then it moved to the Art Gallery of South Australia in Adelaide. And with so many retrospectives and shows, exhibitions, and all of them overseas, not in Australia. I mean, obviously, so many of Balang's works appeared in exhibitions, joint exhibitions in Australia, but the large retrospectives and the solo shows were overseas and not in his own country. So when the Museum of Contemporary Art 3.5 years ago suggested a show solely focused on celebrating this marvellous person's art, we had to ask the question, well, what are we going to do that's different to what's already been done? There's been so much of his work shown already. And talking with Balang, we came to the conclusion that this show should give him the voice to speak about his own works in his own language. And that set apart this exhibition from some of the others beforehand. If you look at the catalogue, and if you look at this website, so we now have johnmawurndjul.com, which is an exciting thing that an Australian artist, Aboriginal artist, in perpetuity will have this website celebrating that particular exhibition. Much of the work and information and knowledge presented here is bilingual. So it's in both his Kuninjku language and in English. And the catalogue, all of the works, he documents his own works and comments on his own works in his own language. And this is actually a talking point in Australian curatorial practice at the moment. From this point on, we are encouraging galleries who show the works of Indigenous artists whose first language is not English to include their own guidance, their own input, and their own documentation, and of course their own languages in the presentation of their works. So let's just have a look at this. This is just a little introduction to himself and the show.
Ngai Mawurndjul. Ai akarme boken, angerne la mangari.
So the name of the show, I Am the Old and the New, came from a discussion we had when we were making short films about two and a half years ago in Maningrida. The team from the Museum of Contemporary Art and the Art Gallery of South Australia came, and during the discussions, the conversations, the interviews, this term or this phrase, Balang said, "Ngai bogen ngagareme, mangari ja mangeringe." I have two ways, the old and the new. Kamaki yol yol me bo mangari ja mangeringe nyaligen bo like muri guru meang maneke bo exhibition mangari ja mangeringe.
Kaime. Mangari history kai history taprapol guru meang punwo. Wa nago banyi me. Bogen manigar me maka new guy me mangeringe new generation. Wa history na im long term no anmani mengat bere long term ijalgar me mungu mangeringe and mangari.
So my father always used to say to me, we are at a point in history now where things are changing rapidly. Things are changing almost catastrophically. But what we must hold to is our history, the history of the old people going right back. But we have the new generations now too, where things are new. And that's who we are, the old and the new. So that's why we chose that term for the title of the exhibition. Okay, now there's a list of short videos. Some of them are actually a bit longer as well, but we'll look at a short one. And we thought this was also appropriate to show video number 6 at the bottom there, educating balanda. And balanda is a word of Macassary's origin, ultimately from Hollander, the Macassan seafarers and Trepang fishermen who came to the shores of northern Australia. That was the word they used to refer to people of European descent. So Aboriginal people use that in in Arnhem Land. They use that term to refer to a person of a non-Aboriginal person. So educating balanda. This is Balang's thoughts on what this show might contribute to that particular undertaking.
Gabri board mana me na nane rarrk iban kan. Yo.
Beda wai Gabri.
Yo gabri na gabri ma nane bini iga kaim. Nane jal dog mang mak rarrk kaim. Yo bu kaya gabri bekan bu namak nabiya kagar me bu gabekan. Bukan kanem nu iban, banyak kan kabeng kan. Ya, kabeng kan war kaime. Kun kuji kame open kaime Sydney Sydney. Kuni kaime balanda, ai balanda mak iban balanda. Mana ngama ngaya kun balanda kun kot nu. Mingan barbun magaya ki. Lah. Kami bunjurai man balanda maki man nyamet nane. Now then.
This is the museum and art gallery of the Northern Territory.
Print man. Kurulk rarrk but cempa balanda bini.
No, Gary.
Kari Sydney.
It should go to Sydney. How do you feel about that?
Very happy.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah. Okay, that's all.
Maybe people look at the painting, they look closely at it, and their heart stops.
Yo, ngajari lagi. Ada kan kami orang balanda iman arbugawat dan open gallery nane dollar point card. Ai ngai po ngai merai ar ngaga jung open ngai men nganan maklar nganan kun bi dollar po ngaman bunagi mo.
Sydney go.
Ngame kona ngame jer ngai mi ai mai ngaru de ngabe kan yo kona ngam kan mana jer ai me na me doro bonga ben kan rarrk ngabe kan ai mengan bawang kare rarrk yo ai mengan kare ngabe kan rarrk ngai no ngabe kan ngai no wai kare gure balanda. Oi man ngaman pun 2 months 3 months akan wale ngaman imerar. My idea ngadu.
I'd like to ask, are all of these trees going to be in the show, or just one, or how many?
Ngaben kan patin ngaga junga ngarang bar manggelu ngaen nganan dorobe ai ngadu ngai
Cross-hatching belongs to the dua moiety.
ai no ngai me ong hagon ba yang ran ai aman.
Okay, I think the point that comes through that little video is that we are moving along the evolution of the participation of Indigenous artists in the presentation of their own works. When John last night spoke about the very origins of this process, the works didn't even have the name of the artist, perhaps in the 1940s. And now we're at the point where people like Balang are actively involved in the curatorial direction, the selection of the works, the conversations with the gallery curators, the whole process. It's, of course, obviously desirable that artists should be intimately involved in the development and the presentation of an exhibition, and that was something that we thought was very important for this particular exhibition. That's a picture of Balang when we were making the films in July 2017 at Maningrida. And what we're going to do now is look a bit at the Mangari, which means the old. What were some of the experiences of Balang as a young man in his art practice? How did he get started? Where was he living? What's the context of some of the aspects of his artistic career? And I thought I'd just better explain my role in some of this. I was living for over about 11 years. I lived on outstation south of Maningrida, going back and forth between Maningrida, which is in central North Arnhem Land, about 550 kilometres east of Darwin. And I built this little cabin where I lived out of the local sandstone and recycled bits and pieces in the rubbish tip. It was an outstation called Yigarakal. It was upstream on the Mann River from Mumeka, where Balang was living, and I used to go back and forwards during the week to Mumeka when I was a school teacher in the late 1980s. And this was the outstation of the artist Mick Kabarku, who had 2 wives and many children, and I taught his children at that community, and I lived in this little rustic stone hut that I built. That was the river that we were on, just a few hundred metres from the outstation. This place is called Kubumi. It's a Rainbow Serpent place. There are these big round holes in the rock. The Rainbow Serpent is said to have pierced the rock, and it was kind of like hard to believe that I was being paid to live a life like this. That's, just every day we did things like that. School would run to about midday. Then after that, people did traditional food gathering. We'd go fishing, shooting buffalo, whatever, digging yams or whatever. People were visiting relatives up and down the different outstations. Sometimes anthropologists have been described as the professional friend. Well, I like to think that I started off as a school teacher, and I don't know if I was ever a professional friend. I think that the ultimate objective is to just be a friend, and to as I learnt the language a bit more, I was able to assist artists like Balang to actually express some of the depth of the documentation and the information behind his artwork. Too often you would read, documentation about an artwork and think, okay, it's like you're just scratching the surface, but there's so much material behind every individual artwork. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to lift that out and pull it apart and make that where it's appropriate available to the people who are going to enjoy those artworks or even buy them? And there was always a debate when I worked at Maningrida Arts and Culture about, should we just present the artworks as aesthetics, as objects, aesthetic objects in their own right, or should we have the story going with it? And people like Balang always said, well, you have both. I mean, they are beautiful objects of power, as he describes them, but they also have history and story and connection to country and to individuals and to clans. And it's for every painting and every part of a painting is like a hyperlink. You click on it, it opens up 1,000 other web pages, so to speak. So, Balang would like Graham Momegi, the Ngai Gray, Igarakal, Iga Momeka, Ngayo, Iga Margoliban, even no Gungarebo, Gun getting an Amwam and Aratjara look me.
So, Gungare now Dolobo, Umea Manbo. Come amanbo, or Yeme, Wamurima, Minjura, only one Balanda, Naka Balanda, Nuya Jura, La Mani, Doropo, Nargo, Nayungi Bimbo, Guate Gurmengwam, now and Guate Gurmekun. Chalwurmengwam now, Noni, Boga, now Ahmed, now Delia Bangla, Ahmed, Colobira, Nameke. Name bim gurmengwa nane kai me name ichu nakai ichu name nangari bimbo nagano I agarme bogen new and oh.
So this is here in the rock country. These little outstations where we all lived are in the rock country, and the rock country is full of paintings of rock art. There are paintings that spread right across the plateau. Far east, there's Kolobadada, up onto the top of the plateau in the south at Norne. And these paintings are our history. These are our history, both the old and the new is what we do today, painting on bark. My father said, we're not going to paint on pieces of paper. We have our own tradition, and that's to paint on bark, so we will continue to do that. So this is a work by Mick Kabarku, and when I arrived in 1988, people like Balang and his siblings and people like Mick Kabarku were doing very large barks. I mean, 2-3 meters in some cases. They're very impressive, and I just couldn't believe these extraordinary works. Finished school and we'd go down to the river and here'd be all of these people producing the most extraordinary works of art. I should just note that these photographs were taken in 1980 by the anthropologist John Altman, who in 1979 and 80 lived at Mawurndjul with Balang and did his field work there. So this is in 1980. Mawurndjul was just a collection of corrugated iron houses, and Balang in his 20s there with some of his, probably late 20s I suppose, and some of the children and his brother's kids, his wife Kay and the, his wife Kay, and these are some of the paintings he was producing at that period in the 79-80 period.
Yo, make tolo ponena amanbo. Name Mumeka nga ni nagan. Mumeka nga ni na name ka tolo bonga manbo. Ane na. Ari da Germany gondor. Man ke mo gondor gan ari bit pe ngare dak tak man.
So I was living at Mawurndjul at the time, and we spent our time cutting bark in the wet season, really big stringy bark trees, and peel the bark off. And these are some of the works I was making at that time. This is a Ngalyod. Ngalyod, Rainbow Serpent. The Ngal part, N-G-A-L, is the female noun class prefix on the stem, yot. So we know that Ngalyod's it's a feminine creator being. And what do you been born? You painted that, right?
No.
Mm. And he's Simbas.
No.
This is his son, Simbaso. And
Namarugo.
so this is a lightning spirit being on the right, called Namaragon. That's a camp life scene at Mawurndjul with Balang. Here, Mawurndjul. Mawurndjul, like Manberg and Dua and Kurulk, no, Guru.
Manege kumege Mumeka kubol tua. Dua kumege. Ai dua kune dua me kubol dua. And nako ba yol me nako ba. Ane ngargo gunet. Ane man bunet ngargo. Nako ba mawa an bon an gonda Mumeka.
So this place is called Mawurndjul, and it is a Dua moiety place. So we had the explanation last night of the two halves in the universe. Everything is divided into two halves: people, clans, places, objects, natural and supernatural phenomena. And Balang says, my father said to me, we are living here because my father lived here, and this is our land, and his father going right back. That's why we hold on to this country, and we're living here today. It's a Dua place, and my clan is Dua. Balang's clan is Kurulk. It's a Dua clan. One of the most when we used to have gallery talks one of the most popular questions was, who taught you to paint? Where did you start? How did you start? Who inspired you? And always Balang says, not his father, but his older brother, Jimmy. Yeah, okay, I just asked permission. He's deceased, so I asked permission to use his name. His name is Jimmy Njiminjuma. And here's Jimmy, Mumeka. So we lived together at Mumeka. And I just asked him to explain how it was that Jimmy influenced him as an artist.
And in my book and war yo kan book and aga boiro and ngaman bunwa ngari name ke ngan book kan ne war name ke balang kok name ke ngai ne kok ngane dang nakana war balang Njiminjuma.
So when I was young, my older brother was already painting, and he came to me one day and he said, do you want to have a go at this too? I'm happy to show you. And I said, okay. So I started learning from my big brother, my gogok, big brother Jimmy, and I just continued from there. And this is at Mumeka, right? Come up. Yo. We lived in the same community, and this is one of the works he was working on at the time. So he's got the whites. They start with the red background and the white silhouette. No, it has a particular name. The silhouette is called rungalno, and then it's divided into the sections where the cross hatching is then placed. Flat game.
Yo, mane unod black kai man. Mane ke kun bad makai hari me.
Yeah.
Balanda me. Stone kai me kun wat ya me. Ngad kun bad ngari me nakan bu. Mane ngari birit me. Sometimes ka jok karan ko ai me ka jale la. Wan kabar me bu me kabar me and hari nan wai na me. Hari nan jar gama grow kayo wal na me kayo naka mai udia bi bom ngale ke Ngalyod bi bom Ngalyod nane murungna yo un ko nuye kun ko maneke kun jabele makaman kun muru ngale bingu ne umai harga buru dia ben bom na me ke kure ko jan ngal ben bom ngale ke mai.
So the bark is a very difficult medium to work on. In the wet season, you take it off the tree and it's in a curved shape. So you have to flatten it whilst it's still moist. And so you can put these weights on it whilst it has this moisture in it and to flatten it out. So as over the days, as you work on the painting, at the end of the day, you put it under weight to keep it flat, ready for the next session the following day. This particular painting shows Ngalyod, the Rainbow Serpent, who has consumed a child from a history story, and it's associated with a place called Kuninjku. And Kuninjku is a white clay mine on a little creek that runs into the Mann River upstream from Mumeka. And the rainbow, so on the top side, the Rainbow Serpent consumes the child. Just leaving the translation there. It's a common theme. You have rainbow serpents and crying children. Anyone who's read some of the works by Ronald and Catherine Burnt, you see often these stories of parents would scare children to stop crying, otherwise the rainbow serpent would come and consume them. These are the stories that show the evidence of that. And the bones of the child are on the lower side there. And there's a particular site at Kuninjku that specifically refers to this, where is the origins of this image.
Kat delek nane mi delek nane nagari ngari garui delek kano heno delek kujangal kuat ngari da jemeni ngari garui jabul and nyamet kupa ngari mai and gunkan ngari mai nane mi baranda wan nane ngat bere delek gurmang jang.
So this painting not only is connected to the site Kuninjku, it is the site Kuninjku because that's where we get our white clay. And we dig the white clay with shovels and with crowbars and with digging sticks, and we get the white nodules out and process them, and that is the clay from that particular site. It is the feces of the rainbow serpent. Ngalyod, what is it?
Ngalyod, Ngalyod, balengari bimbu, kujalu jina meke, jang kayo, milkan kayo, jang. Kalau min balengari me ngaremak, nganan jang, ngadu jang.
This rainbow serpent, probably from memory, is associated with the site Milmilngan. Milmilngan is an important place in our clan estate. Where can I possibly go? Where else could I go to live my life? I can't go anywhere else. These are the places that are important to us. These are the places we own, and I'm not going to live anywhere else because there are djang, or sacred sites, focal point sites for us, and the rainbow serpent is there at Milmilngan. So Balang had a bit of a rainbow serpent theme in the early 80s. These were sort of like when he was developing his technique, these small rainbow serpent paintings, he was producing quite a lot of those. We have some from that period in the Jomi Museum in Maningrida, a little community keeping place. More rainbow serpents. Ngalyod, wari. What the ibim bun? Great, Mumeka.
Ngame delek ngame bright ngari mai gundur ko name dolo bonuga bright ari da jemme ari jet mani bright ngari man nane bright na ngari bimbom name ngari gugur men ame rongkar name ngari jal gur men ari agoi ari mat boy dalet meni delek name dalet meni and ngari mai ngari bimbo rarrk.
So you can see I am painting with a very fine brush. It's a single strand of a grass we call Mannyil, which is a cyperus grass. And we slice that into a very thin single line to make the hatching. And we put the white silhouette down first, wait for that to dry before we start doing the cross-hatching on it. So I chose this slide too because very often, another question that Balang often gets when people are asking about his paintings is, some of them look very esoteric, religious. We had the conversation last night about abstract versus figurative. And sometimes you might just see a painting of a crocodile, or there's a painting of a fish, and you can ask, what's this painting about? It's a fish. But of course, yeah, that's true, but okay. It's what do fish mean to people? Why would somebody choose to paint the fish, the crocodile? obviously these things are of economic importance to people. They are of religious importance. They are connected to places, but also they're connected to people's lived experiences. So, you know, during the day you had to deal with a crocodile in the billabong. I mean, people don't normally kill crocodiles for fun. They are respected, sacred animals. But when I lived in the region, you know, when children were swimming in the river, there weren't that many crocodiles in the watercourses when I lived in the late 80s, early 90s in this region. Today, the numbers have exploded unbelievably. You wouldn't, I couldn't swim in most of the places I used to swim at. I couldn't go back today and swim there. But occasionally, people would eat a crocodile and they would like to remove it out of the area where people were swimming. And I remember sometimes during the day, you know, one of the boys would run up to the camp. There's a crocodile down in the river. Okay, right. And guys would get organised to pull it out. And they would get these great big sort of cables and put shark hooks on the end of them and catch the crocodile. And it would feed the camp for days.
Na me ngai o le meneno. Nane mai ko me ai o ginga. Ore ngori ule ngun bai ngun. Na kana ni yong yo. Nane yong yo. Wa mo di na. Oro ore ginga ngori bun. Bagari ngun. Nane ngari ngun dapara na yong di nane ginga ngari ngun mai nongan. Kalau nane, kami nak bang nane na yung pat ngat ngari bom, ngalu bom, jalagaj ngaran bom, jalagaj, wah ngari bed bu yang wai, nane gulpuru name ngari daje, name gulpuru yo ngat ngari me gulpuru, name ngari bom ayo kan, dabun ngale kan jigar bang.
Marco, yeah.
Now mago mingari garmeni nagan mankole ngari bom charagya la barawu.
Okay, well, Crocodile Dundee, eat your heart out. He says, this crocodile was in the river at Mumeka, in the Mann River. My father said, hey, kids, there's a crocodile down in the river. It's time to get it out because the children will be swimming there. It's too dangerous. We'll take it out, we'll kill it, and we will eat it. So it was removed with spears and axes, dispatched with axes and spears. No mean feat. You know, it looks a good at least 3 meters, over 3 meters long. I have seen this activity. I've participated in some of these activities. Pretty scary. They're magnificent animals, nonetheless. Wan ginga yibimbo.
Ginga na me aman po. Na me len. Hari bom ginga wal nganang na me ginga wan ngaman bun rarrk. Na me dolo bom ngaman bom ginga na me kayu.
So an event would happen like a crocodile in the river's removed, it's killed. Then when I'm thinking about what I'm going to paint next, I think, I'm going to paint that crocodile. And there it is. More rainbow serpents, more children having their heads ripped off. Ngalyod no ngalbang aleki. She's a dangerous thing, that rainbow serpent, isn't she?
Aleke mai ngalyod, na me udia bian bom. Bingunang, nani udia bijor dajang na meke birajang, kundat kanjing ni meng kunurut ni meng, nani bigaju an bime kundat man goji bibo maneke wan kundat goji ayo magaman.
Rainbow serpents are known for dismembering people in our stories. So this child at the top you can see has had her body chopped in half, and another one down below is missing a leg, and another one is in the process of being eaten. I remember seeing a rare Oenpelli python. These are large snakes, pythons. This is not balungs. I'm just reflecting on this myself. This large Oenpelli python was up in a tree, and for the very first time I saw in the scales with the sunlight on it all of the colours of the rainbow, because of the way the scales reflect light, so you can see the whole spectrum. And at that point I understood why it's called the rainbow serpent. I had never understood that before. I could see all of the bright colours on the skin. And when you think about it, snakes are incredible animals. They have the ability to consume whole other large animals. It's as if when they shed their skins, they die and become alive again. And they have this rainbow colour on their body. So you can see how, you know, a religious tradition can develop around something like that. And as we know, this is the oldest continuous religious tradition in the world. We have rainbow serpents depicted in the rock art, which we know are many thousands of years old. The dynamic figures, so-called dynamic figures, are between 8,000 and 12,000 years old, and we have rainbow serpents depicted in, not far from Mawurndjul. Mawurndjul is in the outlier of the Arnhem Land plateau, the outlier area. So you have these big boulders on the plain, and they'll have caves in them, and all of this magnificent artwork. It's an absolute treasure, and an extraordinarily beautiful place to live. And you could see, that every second person almost is an artist. I know Maningrida Arts and Culture. Maningrida, with a population of about 2,200 people, 1/3 of the population are under 15 years old. The Art Centre has over 600 artists on its books. So you're kind of talking about every second person, every second adult is an artist. Maybe they're not full-time, some of them are, like Balang. Their whole careers are wrapped up in being artists. Others occasionally produce artwork. But what an extraordinary statistic. This is one of the most artistically, prolific societies you could imagine.
Manbulagadi.
Mann River. So this place is called Manbulagadi, and it's obviously a bark canoe. We saw one, a bark canoe that was that John had in his slides last night. This one's being used to go fishing. Oh, yeah, wakit muriai.
John Walk, when I'm Harry, I'm not going to John Walk.
Nunga.
Bulai. I mean, when Mario can Guru Langariwam. I got a gift, I got it. Manike Guru Lagayo. Mario Gemini. Amaya Naga Uga, but Mario Gemini. Mario Marco Lipan.
Okay. So these bark canoes, we used to use the canoe to get across the river. This is the Liverpool River. And so this is about 1980. He says, that's me, the captain there with the oar rowing. And we used the canoe to get to the other side or to go, what would it be? It'd be upstream to Margolidban. Margolidban's another outstation. It was the outstation where the artist Yidawala lived, and a group of Yiddicha clan people, Peter Marralwanga. So visiting people at neighbouring outstations is a very important activity. People would they'd be on these HF radios, and you'd hear the HF radio come through. We're starving, the food's finished, have you got anything? So if you've got any food, you pack it up and you go off for a visit and help your family out, taking food up the river, or these days by truck, or even people used to walk. So this is the Tomkinson River floodplain. It's a few kilometres from Mawurndjul. And people obviously go there for magpie geese. These are magpie geese. And people go there for fishing. Incredible resource for fish at the end of the wet season. Magpie geese, ducks, goannas, all sorts of stuff. So this is Balang with a few magpie geese. This is the front cover of John Altman's book, which he wrote based on his PhD thesis. This has become kind of famous photograph at Maningrida. This was the first image I saw this picture before I met Balang, before I went to Maningrida, when I bought John Altman's book, which sort of, I bought it because I thought I'm going to Maningrida. This book's about this area. So here's Balang on this was used for the front cover. So he's got catfish. There's a goanna there, I think. A couple of magpie geese. What are you yelling now?
Nameke Jane Munupar Ngabo Maleke Munupar Ngabo Magur Melai Ngaman Wakik Ngawe Name Jane Ngame Nakano where Guru Langame and Kalaga Name Namanga Garment. Ale Nane Naduru John Oakman Nagano Duru Manedi. So Noga Bulan John Oakman one my hunting one Munupar up and my palak. One I do one I did what big young and me.
So this day I went hunting with John Altman. That's his dog there. And we went down to the Liverpool River, which is sort of tidal, so it's like salt water. So the fish are saltwater fish. And I managed to come across a goanna on the way back. And then we went upstream a bit further where there were magpie geese, and we shot some magpie geese. So that was our day's tally.
What Nameke Ale Munupar Ngabo now Nara Budu Nangorgang Ajaram Mumeka bit.
So in those days we didn't have vehicles. I used to do all of this by walking. I'd walk from the outstation some distance to the river, make the circuit with all the things you had collected during the day, then walk back in the afternoon. I mean, and that's, you know, that could be a circuit of 10 kilometres. One more day. So I'll just explain. This is Balang's father. I say his name. Yeah, Anka Gulunba. And as Balang says, it wasn't my father who taught me how to paint. It was my older brother. But he was very heavily into making fish traps. That was his specialty. So he's making a. Well, I'll let Balang explain. But Nyali Gamangun.
Nameke Wamut. Ngay ngan bon na ngameke nako pa ngapat name mili name abun manjabu imeng ngabun pa karigan bulgai ariwa maneki manki mukman bo jeng ariwa ngari gurmeng guru la ngari gurmeng namanya are nawe pan ngari jal gol indang ariwa budjan ai lang ngapat mình là nyale mình ngana gar mình còn là mặc na nung la ai bala kari golum mar golum ngio ari golum ari name ari jap name ngara nyame kundur ari name en ngari man bo jeng name ga mam ngim yang man jabo mam ngim ke ngim ngari na yawan gabun no ga bed no bu ya e bal men na ka je ai pala je bal men wan gari wai ke ba je ngari wai ke na me ge ngari wai ke kar gat ngari gor men je ngari gal gor men bilmo ngatelek no ga ngari gal gor men.
So this is my father making a conical fish trap, which we call manjabu. They are placed into the tidal creeks of saltwater creeks on the floodplain, on the Tomkinson River floodplain. We make a fence across this small creek. It's full of crocodiles, but we just take the risk because we kind of track the crocodiles, and we can work out where they are, so that it is a risk if we get in the water. We don't have much. We don't have all of the clothes and knives and hunting gear that people have today. We just use whatever was at hand. These traps are made out of a vine called milil. That's a small jungle vine. And we place the trap into the section left open between the two halves of the fence. Stakes go into the soft mud of the creek. The fences are blocked with all this grass. And when the tide is in the right phase, the water pushes the fish into the trap. What's called the tail of the trap, which is the end of it, which is tied up. When that starts flapping, we know that the fish are trying to get out. They can't move past the end of the trap. Then we pull the trap out, empty the fish, and you will see barramundi and catfish and whatever, just heaps and heaps of fish.
Mane wa mane man bom yak ko ko na me hari kang kreng hari juk kun bat kan. Na me ke kulpuru akar me balang kari kan kulpuru ka bo mai gan bun namanya mane un kala wo bengari nam mane.
So this is the fence trap he was just speaking about, blocking it off. There's the manjabu in place. The tide, when it moves in from the right to the left, the fish will only be able to go through the space between the blockage of the fence. So this is Balang and his father working on the fish trap. There's a few more bark paintings here. These are small barks. So, when you're training, you start off small. And it's interesting, when we were looking at these slides and discussing them, sometimes he wasn't sure if they were his or his brother's because the style is so similar. When you're learning from somebody, that's what happens. An emu. Ngurudua. Ayo, ngurudu.
Aleke alkai ngurudu ngari me ngurudu ngale albu ngale mai alkai yiri jang aleke ngurudu.
The emu is a Yiricha animal. We call her ngurudu. Another rainbow serpent. Good.
I make it good. Now what again? I make it. Now what again? I make it. Naga na one bimbo. Bar. I make it.
See?
Now what again? Now what again? Guy me bar na guy. Najinem Kurulk.
Najinem.
Ngari me najinem. Najinem and bar bogen.
Bogen.
What then? Now. Bim pula, namanya ngari bim bom. Bim ngane me, bim kayo jang ngare on yang kue guade, jang kayo na do yang na yung ke korogo jurung namanya. Kalau namanya lengat ni na gujan ngat, min kan ngat ni, kalau namanya ngare wan ngat nan namanya jang bim, mimi namanya ware. Good, bad bo, benok, bu koro man bom na yungi, name ke rarrk na ni nau gure na yungi, name ke jang but kal mungoi ngarenganan, wadi ngai mangkabiri mang jang, koro ni but so
you look at this painting and it's kangaroo. It's actually a black wallaroo from the rock country, which I said, oh, that's the one you call bark. He says, no, we call it Nujinem. You're speaking the wrong dialect. I've been working too long at the western end. So he said, but yes, it's more than just a kangaroo because it reminds us of djang, sacred sites, whether it be a kangaroo, a fish, any other kind of animal. We know the place it relates to. We know the country. It's not just a kangaroo. It brings back to mind all of these things in our country. We'll just whiz through a few more of these. Mawurndjul.
No.
This is the praying mantis, which is an insect, praying mantis. It's related to the hollow log ceremony. Praying mantis are said to look like the skeletons of the dead, and they're painted on the sides of hollow logs. They have their own songs in that ceremony. So again, you look at this painting and all of that stuff comes to mind. Is that it? Oh, so here's some of the kids. This is Barlang's nephew holding some of his paintings. This is somebody. This is Miburo.
Mari.
Yes, somebody else preparing a kangaroo for a ground oven. This is at the white clay mine, Kuninjku. So those drums contain nodules of the white clay that Barlang's digging up. This is his brother, Jimmy, who's a clever man and a singer. We were talking yesterday, John Mundine was talking yesterday about how do you live, what's the good life? How do you enjoy your life? Well, you fill it with art and music and song and dance and all of the great pursuits of the arts. And I mean, the Kuninjku people are no different to anyone else. I used to see these public ceremonies all the time. They're really a lot of fun. They're great beauty. There's art, there are festivals of art and dance and music and socialising with your neighbours. All of these are public ceremonies. This is called, the design, like a wururumi,
Kurulk.
yeah, wururumi. It's a particular vine, which is the name of the song series that Barlang's brother, Jimmy, sings. And there they are ready for the performance. These are bones. The ceremony is called Mawurndjul. Mawurndjul means bone. So this is Kevin Jimmy.
Nameke balang nameke ai ngane dangi nagano. Ai ngawen ware nunga naya ut.
And so he's my younger brother. I'm his older brother, Kevin Jimmy. They just shot a buffalo. This is his older brother, Jimmy Njiminjuma. I'll just whiz. Okay, so that's the end of it. I hope that was an insight into Barlang's life and his art, and thanks very much for listening. Boy.
Cool.